Late medieval Catholicism operated as a spiritual architecture designed to manage the anxiety of a soul facing divine judgment. Sin presented two distinct problems. First was kupa, guilt, resolved through penance and priestly absolution. The second was pena, temporal punishment. This debt remained even after guilt was forgiven, to be paid through good works or suffering in purgatory. This left the believer in a state of perpetual insecurity. Without a way to quantify their penance, they could never be certain if their debt was truly satisfied. The conflict between Tetzel and Luther is frequently categorized as a dispute over church corruption, but the debate also involved a deeper level of ontology, the study of the fundamental nature of reality. Ontology examines what things are at their most basic level of existence. This lens reveals the Reformation as a clash over the fundamental nature of grace itself. In a world of spiritual unknowns, abstract concepts like grace often seek physical forms to provide the believer with a tangible sense of security. In 1343, Pope Clement VI decreed the existence of the treasury of merit. This was a theological reservoir of excess holy works accumulated by Christ and the saints, which the Pope could dispense for the benefit of the faithful. Johann Tetzel utilized this doctrine to materialize grace. He turned the complex theology of penance into a form that was palpable and emotionally resonant for the common person. His jingle, "As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs," established a direct cause-and-effect relationship between a physical sound and a spiritual outcome. This transaction produced the Indulgence certificate, a physical object serving as a portable symbol of security. For those dreading divine judgment, this paper functioned as an appellative mantra, a concrete coping mechanism kept in a wallet or purse to alleviate anxiety. Tetzel transformed grace into an objectified commodity, a predictable and transactional means to an end. Martin Luther's opposition began with his own struggle. He found that no amount of self-inflicted discipline could provide his conscience with genuine security. He described this existential torment as unfecting, a state of doubt, panic, and desolation before a righteous God. Luther found his breakthrough in the Book of Romans, concluding that grace was a gift received through faith alone. This realization removed the need for the theological economy of merit. While Luther rejected the Indulgences, he recognized the human need for tangible forms. In his pastoral work, he replaced the transactional receipt with new physical anchors for the faith of the laity. He translated the Bible into the common German vernacular. By leveraging the printing press, he turned the principle of sola scriptura into a tactile reality, physical books that people could hold and read for themselves. He also introduced congregational singing in the vernacular. The shared sound of a hymn made theology audible and resonant, replacing passive observation of Latin services. These new forms, the readable book and the communal hymn, offered an embodied security rooted in the gospel rather than a financial transaction. We can better understand the depth of this conflict by applying the framework of anthropologist Eduardo Viveros de Castro. The pre-Reformation system functioned as a theological multiculturalism. It assumed a single objective nature of grace, accessed through different cultural practices and rituals. Viveros de Castro's concept of multinaturalism suggests a different dynamic, that different beings share a similar subjectivity, but perceive fundamentally different natures or realities. Applying this to Luther, his reforms introduced a form of theological multinaturalism. He argued that grace possessed a fundamentally different nature than the one presented by Tetzel. This table illustrates the divergence between these two perceived realities. In Tetzel's reality, grace was a transactional commodity. In Luther's reality, grace was relational and a freely given gift. The Reformation was not just a debate over beliefs, it was a collision between two different definitions of what grace is. Luther changed the theology, but the human need for tangible security remained. This led to a persistent tension in how these new doctrines were received. A typology of materialized assurance shows that while theological forms changed, the psychological function, alleviating anxiety, remained constant. The locus of assurance shifted from the physical certificate to personal access to the Bible. However, simplified into a slogan, sola fide functions as a mental amulet. This is the amulet paradox. If a declaration of faith is used purely as a verbal charm to alleviate doubt, it can bypass the internal struggle of Anfechtung and the difficult reality of spiritual change that Luther's own experience required. This highlights a universal tension in religious experience: the search for spiritual truth versus the need for a concrete expression of that truth. There is a significant psychological weight in facing spiritual unknowns without a simple method to manage the fear. The challenge for any tradition is preventing the forms of faith from becoming substitutes for a relationship with the divine, becoming mere coping mechanisms against existential dread. Faith, as Luther understood it, is a lifelong process of grappling with spiritual anxiety, not a single transactional event that provides certainty. The anchor of the soul is not found in a piece of paper or a simplified formula, but in a persistent trust in the sufficiency of Christ. When embodied in practice, that trust becomes its own reality,